In the hands of competent directors, it's been proved that it's possible to recapture or reignite the love for a previously established movie. However, it's become commonplace for studios to hire cheap, unknown directors to helm these kinds of projects. Hoping to ride the shirt tails of the respective movies, these have rarely resulted in notable releases. Typically created with the intention of solely cashing in on a namesake, the horror community has become inundated with a slew of deeply disappointing pictures, generating mass pessimism throughout. This trend has also been applied to highly respected foreign pictures, which over time has created some of the most embarrassing pictures in cinema history. And today, we'll be looking at the very worst. So join me as I count down the top 10 worst horror remakes. For this list, I'll be looking at the very worst examples of horror cinema remakes. Whether it be a readaptation, direct recreation, or an international translation, it's eligible for this list. I'll also be overlooking made-for-TV movies, as that's a list for another time. So let's begin. Number 10. George Romero's sequel Day of the Dead is a contender for the greatest zombie movie of all time. 2008's cash-in remake is a contender for the worst. Following the success of the respectable update of Dawn of the Dead in 2004, the rush to release the follow-up would ultimately be the series' undoing. Only loosely following the original narrative and choosing to tell its own story. Written by Jeffrey Reddick, best known for his screenplays for the Final Destination franchise, the movie deviates from its established social satire into an uninspired and underwhelming chore of a story. Upon test screenings, the movie was received so poorly that it became a straight-to-video release. Also featuring a confusing recasting of Ving Rhames, Day of the Dead is now seen as mostly as an embarrassment to the franchise. Number 9. Following the success of The Ring and The Grudge, Asian horror fast became a heralded genre, a genre that all but ended with the release of the Western adaptation of One Missed Call. The tale of a mysterious phone call that leaves messages from the point of the owner's future death. Starring Shannon Sossamon, who delivers an uninvested lead performance. What truly made this a forgettable picture was the complete lack of atmosphere, recycling the plot devices of other similar movies, and ultimately relying on jump scares for the majority of the runtime. Although turning a moderate box office return, One Missed Call is considered the worst conversion of J-horror to date and recognized as the picture that killed the trend of westernizing Asian cinema. Number 8. Recognized as one of the greatest examples of extreme cinema, translated for an English-speaking audience, Martyrs became one of the most disappointing conversions of modern times. Never even attempting to achieve the poignancy of its origin, but choosing to play the material overly safe, the movie was presented as a heavily diluted rendition. The sheer cowardice of the filmmakers transformed such a profound picture into nothing more than a superficial cash grab, making one of the most memorable finales in cinema history into a bland and meaningless ending. Despite the original being highly praised, the lack of any interest or actual effort in the remake makes Martyrs a relievingly obscure picture. Number 7. As one of the genesis pictures of the slasher movement, a remake of 1980's Prom Night was inevitable. Released in 2008, the updated version became instantly recognized as one of the worst movies of the genre. Following the story of Donna, a girl whose family were killed by her obsessed former teacher, who on her prom night again becomes victim of his return. Despite the iconic status of the original, it's still an underwhelming slasher, devolved into a color-by-numbers adaptation by apparently unskilled filmmakers, showing no attempt at making a competent picture. Utilizing every cliché in the book, all with the poorest of execution, Prom Night is nothing more than a perfect example of how not to make a horror movie. Number 6. From John Carpenter's iconic picture comes 2005's The Fog. Having issues with his original movie, it would actually be Carpenter to suggest his movie be remade. Serving as a silent producer, the final product would become an embarrassment. Although following the premise of the original, The remake features bland characters performed by unskilled actors, pointless side stories, a complete lack of atmosphere, and subpar CGI even by 2005 standards. Winning the 2006 Stinker Award for Least Scary Horror Movie, using every worn-out horror cliché in the book, The Fog is the epitome of lazy and uninspired filmmaking, has become a go-to movie when referencing horror remakes that shame their own origin. Number 5. Released at the peak of the 80s slasher movement, April Fool's Day became a minor hit. Earning itself a small cult following was the basis for the 2008 update. The movie follows a vengeful killer who supposedly died in an April Fool's prank the previous year. Originally intended to be a direct remake, the plot would be updated to suit modern trends. Instead of creating an original take around the core of the narrative, chose to recycle existing narratives that had already become stale and outdated, peppering the picture with unimaginative and predictable scares. To seasoned horror fans, April Fool's Day is nothing more than a disappointing chore of dated cliches that showcases every reason why horror is considered lowbrow entertainment to cinephiles. Number 4. Possibly the most expected picture on this list due to the social media bandwagon. The Wicker Man is one of the few movies that lives up to its infamous nature. Starring Nicolas Cage in possibly his most recognized eccentric role, the movie keeps the basic beats of the source but presented in an overly bizarre narrative. Already being a darkly intricate picture, the 2006 adaptation would replace the entirety of the subtle details with nonsensical subplots, ultimately driving the picture into multiple dead ends. Unlike many other movies on this list, the saving grace is Nicolas Cage's performance, which makes The Wicker Man an oddly watchable movie, with his hyper reactions creating a novel curiosity to simply see what his over-the-top character will do next. Number 3. Eli Roth is without question a polarizing name in the horror community. Finding initial success in the indie hit movie Cabin Fever, nobody expected a remake so soon. Producing the movie himself, Roth originally intended it to be the 4th installment. Instead, chose to reboot his already existing franchise, releasing just 2 years after Patient Zero. Condensing the original story for a faster pace, the movie would not only strip any character development, but also removing the slightest passion for filmmaking, choosing not to bring anything new to the narrative but create an almost identical picture. Releasing to unanimously scathing reviews, possibly making Cabin Fever the most successfully disappointing franchise in modern horror. Number 2. Every so often, a movie comes along that absolutely nobody asked for. Recognized as one of the greatest psychological horror movies of all time, the remake of Jacob's Ladder is by far one of the most unnecessary. Starring Michael Ealy as Jacob, a doctor who suffers from progressively more disturbing hallucinations following the death of his brother. Lacking any of the profundity of its source, altering the character's backstory which in turn steals any impact upon the story arc, stripping all of the intrigue, dread, and atmosphere, presenting the narrative as nothing more than a color-by-numbers psychological thriller. Even without comparing to the original, Jacob's Ladder is a predictable, unimaginative, and generically bland chore of a movie. There is, however, one picture that surpasses them all. If you enjoyed Demented Top 10s, show your appreciation by hitting the thumbs up button, and be sure to subscribe to keep up with the channel. Also, Have you seen future top 10s and follow Demented Pictures on Facebook, or consider supporting the show on Patreon? Links in the description box below. And a very special thank you to Candace Jones as my top tier patron. Number 1. There is no true way to explain the boredom and irritation of seeing the 1998 remake of Carnival of Souls. Stripped completely of its atmosphere and barely resembling the original, the movie tells of a young girl who, after witnessing the murder of her own mother by a carnival clown, is attacked by the killer and begins hallucinating his return. Originally being a beloved dark tale of stalker and victim, the remake would feature none of the character depth, intrigue, or notable acting. Starring Bobby Phillips and a pre-saw Shawnee Smith, perhaps the most curious addition to the movie was the inclusion of Wes Craven. Splattered across all of the advertising media in a vain attempt to stir interest by the attachment of the horror master's name. Not even enjoyable in a so good it's bad way, Carnival of Souls is recognized not only as one of the worst movies in horror, but also one of the worst movies of all time. So there was my list. Were there any I missed? Which horror remakes do you hate the most? Leave a comment below and be sure to check out some other top 10s on screen now. And remember, no list is definitive but the one you make yourself. This is Mike from Demented Pictures saying, may your movies be bloody and your scares be shitless.